What's up everyone, Adrian here, and in today's video I'm going to be talking to you about one of my favorite topics, and that being portrait photography. So if you're not familiar with me, I am a portrait and travel photographer based out here in Santa Clara, California. You can always visit my website to see more of my work, but today we're going to be focusing more on the portrait aspect of it. So I've been doing portraits for quite a while, but within the past 5 years particularly, I've had more of a focus on different types of portraiture and like the different disciplines within this kind of space. So things from like lifestyle, grad shoots, partners proposing to their partners. There's a lot of different pictures I've taken involving people, and I want to be able to impart onto you what I've learned throughout my experience. So this video is going to be particularly dedicated to people that want to focus on portraiture and have a better sense of, where to start, how to produce it, how to plan it as well. However, the concepts that I will be talking about in this video can also apply to more intermediate and advanced photographers once you've developed that eye for portraiture. Now, looking at the breakdown of the video, there's a couple things I'm going to be talking about, that being what is the definition of a portrait, and also my take on that, and then getting into the pre-production phase of it, things that I look out for when I'm planning, when I'm working with someone, and then going into the production itself. So let's hop right on in. Getting into the first order of business, looking into the definition of a portrait. After searching it up on Google, it states this: it's the artistic expression of a person's face or expression. However, it can also include the whole body or a group of people. And while I agree with this definition, throughout the years and through my own experience, I've come to develop my own definition of a portrait, and it's, I'd say, two halves to one whole. One half being who I'm working with, that being my subject. I consider what is it like from their perspective and how do they want to be depicted through this portrait. Now, looking into the different types, which I will get into later on, you have to think about them in a bit of a persona kind of fashion. Not necessarily you have to understand the person both inside and out, but just have an idea of like who they are and like what their goals are, so that way it helps you get a sense of what the shoot is going to look like and how it's going to progress. As for the other half to that definition, I consider it from my perspective as a photographer. How do I depict my subject in this time and space, and what context are they going to be at? Again, it's kind of like looking at them through a persona and not necessarily just as a person, but if you do know them personally, it does help you get a better sense of what their interests are, what the mutual baseline expectations are like, and also seeing how both of you can work in harmony with each other, so that way you can make not only something really cool, but also express both of your mutual interests in a different light. I'll get more into that later on. Now that we've defined what a portrait is, let's talk about the pre-production phase of it. And this is where a lot of the groundwork goes into before getting into the actual execution and production of the shoot itself. For me, there's like a lot of questions that I like to ask for myself, at least, because I was a former tech salesperson. So there was a lot of things that I feel like I need to learn about someone or like something and have a general concept of what I'm working with, so that way I'm just much more better prepared in the moment of the shoot, and also I can help who I'm working with better set them up for success as well. Now, there's a couple things that I like to ask, particularly who I'm working with, what am I working with, where am I working with, and why are we doing this? Starting off with who I'm working with, like I mentioned earlier, I like to think about who I'm working with in a persona type of way, not necessarily who am I working with as the person. That right there is a bit harder to collect that kind of information. Granted, there are other ways that you can collect that information. We have LinkedIn, social media sites, Instagram, Facebook, all that good jazz, but when you're on limited time, you need to think about them through a persona kind of perspective. So a really good example is, for example, I did a grad shoot recently. Now, in working with my buddy, kind of seeing how their goals are, what they want to get out of the shoot, I saw them as like, okay, this is what I'm working with. This is a recent grad from SFSU, and looking at the color scheme of their attire and looking at where we're shooting to, that will help me determine what colors to look out for, and also how I can best guide the shoot, and also work with them to see what other inspiration that we can draw from in order to create something really cool. As for the who, let's go into the what am I working with. Kind of bleeding off into the earlier point, you got to consider what it is that you're working with. Are you working with multiple outfits? Are you going to be working with 2 outfits, 1? Are you going to be working with props? There's a lot of things that you can consider, and I'll drop a little bit other questions later on in the comments section too, so that way you have a baseline understanding of just some questions to keep it not only open, but seeing with all that open information how you can go best approach the shoot itself. Now getting into the where aspect of it, kind of simple. It's where you're going to be doing this. So 1 location, 2 locations, how far do you have to drive out? Are you going to meet up with them? Are you going to carpool? So if you can answer where you're going to be doing it, and also like what time of day is going to be important too, because that also affects what kind of colors that you're going to be working with, and also just the time and space and the traffic. Be mindful of where you're working at. Finally, we have the why of what we're doing this, and I feel like this why ties in everything that I've said earlier on. If you don't have a reason for why you're doing the shoot, you're kind of going into it blind. So having a clear definition or goal in mind is super important. That being, hey, are we going for 5 photos, 15 photos, 25 photos? Are we sharing these photos through like a photo album? Are we going to be sharing them through your friends and family? Are we going to be posting it through social media? What is the end goal here? And if you can determine what that is, it's going to help not only you as a photographer feel much more confident in seeing what it is that you're going to be shooting forward to, but it's going to be helping the customer, client, or even who you're working with at the time get a better sense of what the expected outcome is, so that way you both have a mutual understanding of what the mission is. Now, let's get into the fun portion of the bit, that being the actual production of the shoot itself. So there are a lot of things that can happen within the day of the shoot or time of the shoot. There are things that are going to be within your control, and there's going to be things outside of your control too. But as long as you keep a cool, calm, collected level head, you can definitely guide the shoot and also, in a way, take advantage of the environment that's presented to you. Granted, there are other things that are going to be out of control. Like I said earlier, say a group of people may have entered your shot or are waiting for you to take a certain shot so they can pass by. I've definitely been in that situation before. However, there are ways that you can use the environment to your advantage. I'm going to be talking about a couple different concepts that I feel like I wish I knew earlier on and that I want to impart onto you guys, so that way when you're in the heat of the moment or in that actual shoot, you're much more prepared to see how you can navigate, say, the flow of the area and have a better sense of what it is to look out for. Like I mentioned earlier, some of these concepts I'm going to be talking about are going to be really good for beginners or struggling portrait photographers. However, once you have an idea or grasp kind of like the concept of what I'm talking about, you can even use these tools and methods later on as you progress your skills. So starting off with the first concept, incorporate movement within a still image. So what I mean by that is, although that you are taking one singular frame of a person, you can incorporate movement in a couple different ways. Think about how the subject is moving within that time and space. So for example, if I'm working with someone, I like to say, hey, go ahead and walk from point A to point B, and I as a photographer will go ahead and orient myself in different positions. I would say go in front of the person or go on the side or even go behind them, so that way you can take multiple different angles of them walking, say alongside a beach or within a wooded area. You can take advantage that way. Also, it doesn't have to be just the person walking. You can think about what the time and place and setting is, and that kind of bleeds into my second point, that being take advantage of your environment. So bleeding off of the first point a little bit, think about what is going on within the scene. For example, if you're going to be by a beachfront, you have waves crashing in onto the shore, so you can have someone walk along the waves and incorporate the movement of the waves, maybe by using a low shutter speed. Or if you're going to be in some redwoods, for example, you can go ahead and have them like walk onto the redwoods, and if it's really windy or there's an open space preserve, go ahead and have them like walk against the trees or something, so that way the trees are swaying, and incorporate some level of movement. I'm going to drop a couple examples here so that way I can go ahead and talk about them a little bit more in detail. I have here a picture of my cousin Christian. We're taking a trip over at Mount Rainier. Although the portrait doesn't show his full face or the front of his body, it shows the scene in general and also the dynamicism of the clouds. Granted, we are going through the mountains, so a lot of the focus was hiking through Mount Rainier, but it's enough to capture the scene, say with a wide angle lens, and also incorporate what the scene is thanks to the mountains, the attire, as well as the clouds themselves too. Incorporate movement that way. Another concept I really want to drive home is incorporating props. Now, props can mean many different things. It can mean, say, a car using sunglasses, using say a drone camera or remote. There's a lot of ways that you can go ahead and depict a different scene or a different mood of a scene using so many different objects that you have on hand. So ask the subject that you're working with, do you have anything that you want to use during the shoot together? Or sometimes I would even supply some things myself. Something that I would always have on hand would be a pair of sunglasses. So that way I just protect my eyes from the sun, but also see if I can give my pair of sunglasses to my subject, and that way they can pose with it, use it to like say contemplate. They can do a lot of things with it too. So use props wherever you can, because it not only makes things easier, adds some diversity to the shots, but it also really depicts like who a person is depending on what their interests are. So for example, say you both like cars, you can definitely use cars to your advantage, post up on the car, get into the car, get out of the car, also direct them to do certain different movements using the item in hand, so that way you can go ahead and create many like different lifestyle shots in the same time too. So use props wherever you can. Building off of using props, another thing that is really important when working with someone is getting to know them. Now, you don't have to get to know them as a person, both inside and out, but just have an understanding of like who they are, what their interest is like. So sometimes during a shoot, I'd ask like not only how your day is going, but also what it is that you've been listening to lately. Are you watching any TVs, movie shows? So that way I have a baseline understanding of what it is that they're interested in or what interests them, and then kind of use that and seeing how I can marry my own experience or even my interest to the shoot itself. So a really good example of this is I love music. Now, one of my friends, his name is Arjun, we both really like John Mayer, and I presented the idea of doing a John Mayer-esque kind of shoot in the style of soft rock. So what we did is that we ended up going to his place, he posted up with his guitar, and we went ahead and took some pictures right by his windowsill, and it was really cool and moody for it is, but also kind of depicted Arjun in a different light as well. No pun in there intended, but using props and inspiration from other sources and getting their input about what it is that they want is super important. So converse with your subject and get a better sense of what they like. One of my, I'd say, overused portrait concepts, but one that I really like working with and sharing with people too, is say like a Top Gun-esque kind of shoot. So a couple examples that I can share in two different contexts is, one, I was with my homie Oliver, we were traveling in Vermont together, and during golden hour, we flew some drones over a lake. Now, he also had a pair of Smith glasses on that contrasted really well with the orange background, and he had his DJI drone in hand. So I was like, hey man, just go ahead and walk towards me, kind of like you're looking like a Top Gun pilot, and we took some really cool portraits during that time together too. Taking the same concept and applying it to a different space and time, you can definitely make this work out. So another example is I went with my buddy Cambria to go ahead and take her portrait shoots for her grad shots. Now, we had a location, that being the Water Pulgus Temple, over on the peninsula side of the bay, and she had a pair of aviator glasses. So we had this idea after coming to find out that we both are familiar with Top Gun, like let's go ahead and have her walk towards me as I'm taking shots of her, taking on and off her glasses as she's looking out to the side. And I tell you what, using that concept is really cool because now you can have something to fall back on and have something that people can relate to, and that right there is where the harmony comes into play of just seeing what your mutual interests are and seeing how you can work together to create something really cool, maybe not particular to the shots that you both had in mind earlier on, but you have something where it's just really fun and engaging for both parties involved. There are a couple other points that I want to drive home before I wrap up this video. One in particular, kind of bleeding off of my earlier point about using different inspiration into the shoot, is the use of color. At least for me, color is super important within my work, and I need to have things that accurately portray the color. Granted, every camera is going to be different, every video editing software or photo software is going to be different too, and people are going to have their own different styles as well as portrayals. Little coffee break. Speaking of the use of color, this is something that I wish I understood earlier on. Not necessarily understand the full color wheel, but at least have a baseline understanding of how color works with each other. I'm not going to go into full color theory because that is a separate topic and beast in of itself. But what I want to drive home with color is just seeing what that you can work with. That being, can you work with contrasting colors? Can you work with complementary colors, analogous colors? Look for colors not only with what the person's wearing or what they will be wearing, but also consider the scene and like what colors are available to you. So for example, you can go ahead and go to your local park, colors out in the middle of the day, sun's overhead at noon. All the colors are going to be more than likely washed out because the harsh sun is beating down on those colors. So you can go for some maybe pastel looks or other kinds of colors depending on what you're looking for. Otherwise, you can go to that same park and the colors will be so much more different during golden hour. So tones are going to be much more warmer, yellows, oranges, golds. There's a lot of things that you can look for depending on what time of day of shoot that it is. But also considering who the person is as well and what they're interested in. Say you could be taking some lifestyle or fashion shots. If they like to wear all black, look for something where the background is like maybe much more colorful, white, red, something to help make them pop, because if you're going to be placing someone who's dressed in all black up against a black backdrop, it can be hard to identify and separate your subject from the background itself. So be mindful of what colors you're working with at that given time. The last point I want to drive home before I wrap up this video is going to be framing. Framing can come in a variety of different forms, and I say this because over the years, I've definitely used so many different types of environments, but also say tools within Lightroom itself or even through my camera to see how I can frame my subject. So if you're not familiar already, one tool that is widely well known and sometimes often hated on because it's just so overused is the rule of thirds. So for me at least, I like to keep my subject within the center of the frame and then have some space on both the left and the right hand side, so that way it gives the image some breathing room. However, you can also use thirds in a different way. So for example, I have my buddy Arjun over here. He's on the right hand side of the frame. He's also on the left hand side of the frame, so his shadow and his person are in two different spots. Then again, it drives home to the point that the framing aspect of it, you don't have to have your subject in the middle at all times, but you can use it to your advantage in so many different ways, and this is because of using the light and how it's also framed. Speaking of framing too, you can also think about it in what is natural to the environment and that I can use to help just focus and hone in on my subject. So kind of building off of that same Arjun example too, we shot this portrait over at Tahoe really early in the morning, and the way that the light was hitting the scene is that it was coming in from the right hand side, so it created some really harsh shadows, but that also made this triangle effect where now I could just have him post up on one side of the frame, and then everything that's darkened out just doesn't seem relevant, and I can just focus and really guide the viewer's eyes into what they should be focusing on. So that's one way that you can use frames, whether it be say the rule of thirds or even direct harsh sunlight too. But also consider the time and space where you're working at too. You can use other tools like leading lines to help guide the viewer's eyes into where you want them to see. The other aspect of it is working with the environment, is seeing what other lines or other enclosures that you can go ahead and secure or hone in on your subject on. So a couple other examples that I can share is I took this portrait of Emilio over in this bamboo forest in Japan when we went in last October, and I used the surrounding bamboo to encapsulate my subject, but I also used the middle row of that frame because there was some sunlight leaking in. That helped give Emilio much more shape as well as separation from the background, so that way I was using my environment to my advantage. Another really good one, for example, is I was shooting with my buddy Parth. We went over in, I believe, like Napa County, somewhere North Bay. We were taking photos of just this really dull area, but what I liked about it a lot was just the use of the environment and the colors that were present. So it's a very simple portrait of him holding his hand onto the table itself. I used the lines from the trees and the verticality to also help accentuate how tall he is, but also just complement and balance the frame overall. The hand onto the table created like this leading line thanks to the creases from his body and his apparel. up towards his face, and considering the verticality of, say, the subject's body as well as the environment, it helped encapsulate, provide balance, and also just frame Parth really well too. Granted, I also use a 35mm lens here, so that way I don't get that much of a compression effect and I can just get more of an environmental shot, so that way it helps build out this scene. But there are other ways that you can use framing, not just say using 4x5 thirds rule, but just using the environment to see how you can go ahead and encapsulate your subject in the photo. That's all that I got for today. I threw a lot at you, but if you keep these concepts in the back of your mind, you can definitely use them as you're starting out portrait photography and develop these and add them to your own sense of style as you develop your sense of shooting throughout the years to come. Now, if you haven't already, go ahead and follow my Instagram page. I'll drop a link to that below, where I'll be posting more tutorials and also just breakdowns of my portrait images, so stay tuned for that. Additionally, if you like this content, go ahead and drop a like, so that way I understand that this content is free to you guys and that you guys like it a lot, enough for me to make it. And if you want to follow more about what other content I have later on related to portraits as well as travel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, so that way you are in the loop about what's to come. There are a lot of things that I can dive into pertaining to each topic that I talked about, but I just wanted to keep a nice, simple, basic overview, so that way, again, you guys have something to fall back on or use as you're in your photography journey too. So with that in mind, I'm on to the next video. I gotta get to creating, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.